Good evening, members, and good evening to the members of the public that are here to speak this evening. And could I welcome everyone that's watching us on the various systems that we have for people to watch our planning meeting. Item 1, apologies for absence. I have apologies for absence from Councillor Monday, and Councillor Mrs Beavis is running a little late, but she hopes to be here by 7:30. But everyone else is here. Item 2, declarations of interest. Does any member wish to declare the existence and nature of any disclosable pecuniary interest, other pecuniary interest or non-pecuniary interest relating to items on the agenda having regard to the Code of Conduct for members? Councillor Swear.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Just as a member of Essex County Council, and I shall stay on vote on all the applications.
Thank you. Councillor Abbott.
Thank you. Item 5B, non-pecuniary interest as a member of Riverwalk Parish Council, which has made representation, but I always leave the room when any planning applications are discussed.
Thank you. Anyone else? No. Item 3, the minutes. We are having to defer the minutes of the previous meetings. They are still not ready, so they will be deferred until the next meeting. Item 4, public question time. We have no general questions on planning this evening. Members of the public that wish to make a statement come to the table prior to the application that they wish to speak on. That brings us to application item 5, planning applications. We have no items under Part B, so we go straight on to the Part A applications. And the first application, 5A, is application 19-01896 Alt. Land north of Wood End Farm, Hatfield Road, Whittem, and I do have speakers on this item. The first person that wishes to make a statement is Councillor Steve Hicks. He is speaking on behalf of Whittem Town Council. Councillor Hicks, would you like to come to the table and make your statement, please? And could I remind everyone that is speaking, you get 3 minutes and we do time you. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Chair. Take this off to speak. Evening all. I'm here to read out this statement on behalf of Whittem Town Council at this Braintree District Council Planning Committee meeting of the 9th of November 2021, plan application 19/01986/outs. This outline application on the southern edge of Whittem has been with planners for almost 2 years, and you now are considering in effect a new application. This is a much better but can still be improved both now and at reserved matter stage. Some of the Town Council's concerns still need answers, particularly around highway connections such as the lorry lay-by directly opposite the cycleway access. The NHS, as usual, only asks for money to provide what it admits is needed, namely new surgery facilities, as the existing cannot be extended, but again has failed once more to explain what it actually proposes to do, when and where. Frankly, this is not good enough for a rapidly growing town, and the LPA should postpone any decision on this application until it has a clear statement on meeting health services needs beyond taking money from the applicant and just leaving it in the bank. Planning committee members will know of the problems with narrow roads on the Maltins estate nearby, but there is an assurance at this stage that road widths and parking will avoid repeating those mistakes, such as a recently highlighted fire service vehicle that was unable to gain access on the Maltins. The Fire Authority needs hydrants, yet this does not feature in the proposed Section 1 and 6 agreement. As we move forward towards carbon emission, mention should be made of using heat pumps as well as solar panels and water harvesting. Strutt and Parker wrote on the 17th of January 2020 regarding road access between this site and the adjacent Red Rose site at Lodge Farm, currently being built out. Has the LPA followed this up with Countryside on behalf of Woodland Farm? You have copies of letters in front of you, previous correspondence. There is also limited clarity and commitment on joining up with neighbouring public rights of way. The letter on file from Rayleigh's Farm, dated 20th November 2019, denying any right to a footpath and cycleway along the railway line, is not addressed in the planning officer's report. Is there a grain of truth in this? And if so, what is to be done to secure this route? The officer's report at page 31 sees a so-called ransom strip between these two sites and nearly finished as a barrier to any link between them. Has the LPA urged the applicant to acquire the small parts of this strip needed to provide it and avoid the dangerous foot and cycle route proposed along Hatfield Road? If not, is there any intention to use the council's powers of compulsory purchase? The town council can be expected to support any such action.
Councillor Hicks, I'm sorry I have to stop you there, but we do have
Very
a
much
copy of what you were going to say. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. The next person wishing to make a statement on this application is Mr. Kevin Coleman. He is the agent. Mr. Coleman, please. Mr. Coleman is from Phase 2 Planning and Development.
Good evening, and thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight. As councillors will be aware, this application relates to a site that is proposed for allocation in your new local plan. The new local plan has reached an advanced stage of preparation and effectively establishes the principle of the residential use of the site. The application before the committee tonight has been the subject of extensive discussion with the council's planning and design officers, and indeed it was just mentioned that the application's been with the council for a couple of years now, which is the length of process that we've been through. The scheme has evolved through proactive engagement, both at the pre-application stage and at the application stage, and as councillors will be aware from the committee report in front of them, both the overall design principles and the detailed design code is supported by the council's design and planning officers. Although the application is in outline, the means of vehicular access into the site from Hatfield Road have been the subject of detailed design and detailed discussion with the Highway Authority and Highways England, National Highways these days, both of whom are supportive of the application. The vehicular access into the existing farm has been the subject of specific discussion, and all of the highway experts are supportive of the proposal as it stands, which leaves the access in its current position. As well as the appropriate means of vehicular access, the proposed development also contains a suite of measures to encourage non-car travel. These measures include an extended pedestrian and cycle network, which is designed to tie into the neighbouring routes along Hatfield Road, as well as additional off-site improvements. The sustainable travel measures also include the provision of a new bus service, as referred to in the Section 106 heads of terms, principles of which have been discussed with the operator, First Buses, and with the Highway Authority, both of whom, again, are supportive. In fact, all of the pedestrian, cycle and bus improvements before you with this application have been supported by the Highway Authority. The drainage strategy for the site, which is based on the most sustainable option of infiltration, is supported by the lead local flood authority, and the impact of the development on local services, education, health, and so on, have all been carefully assessed, and you'll be aware from the papers that we include contributions to all of these services as required, and contributions to the Maltings Lane Community Centre. So overall, it's a development that's been carefully designed to accord with the principles set out in your local plan, to deliver the appropriate infrastructure needed to support it, to meet the requirements of the various operators and service delivery agencies, and above all, to deliver a high-quality residential scheme. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Coleman. Thank you very much for attending. Excuse me. And that brings us to the end of people wishing to make a statement. So we get on to the presentation, and the presentation is going to be made by Alison. Good evening, Alison.
Good evening, Madam Chair. Good evening, members. The application I present to you this evening is in relation to Wood End Farm, Whittem. The application seeks outline planning permission with all matters reserved apart from the detailed access for up to 400 residential dwellings and a day nursery with all associated other access, servicing, parking, drainage infrastructure, landscaping, open space and utilities. The application site lies to the northwest of Hatfield Road on the south side of Whittem and is approximately 18.9 hectares in area. It sits to the west of the site known as Lodge Farm, which is currently being developed by Red Row Homes, and to the northwest of Maltings Lane Estate. The site is bounded to the north by the railway line and to the southeast by the A12. In the wider context, further to the southwest lies open countryside in agricultural use that serves to separate Whittem from the neighbouring village of Hatfield Peverell, which lies approximately 1 kilometre away from the site boundary. Whittem Town Centre is located approximately 2 kilometres to the northeast of the site and provides a wide range of shops and services and facilities, as well as having a mainline railway station. Hatfield Peverell Station is located approximately 2 kilometres to the south on the same line as Whittem. The site comprises a single field with a peripheral field boundary marked predominantly by hedgerows and in place hedgerow trees. The southern section of the site is occupied by commercial premises, primarily a car dealership, which comprises a range of buildings, areas of hard standing and circulation space, accessed off Hatfield Road. Immediately adjoining the application site on its southwest boundary is Wood End Farm itself, and an additional residential property known as Mayfield Cottage. There is also the King Centre, place of worship, and a converted office barn, both of which are currently accessed from a private drive that leads from Hatfield Road close to the junction with the A12. In terms of the policy context for the site has been allocated as a strategic growth location under Draft Local Plan Policy LPP 23 of the Section 2 Plan, a factor which must be given significant weight in the planning balance assessment for this proposal. The policy proposes up to 450 new homes, affordable housing, formal and informal open space, play space and allotments, including an appropriate countryside edge to the development and buffering to the railway line to the north. A new 30-place standalone early years and childcare facility, financial contributions to primary education provision and contributions to other community facilities, including health. The policy also says there needs to be appropriate vehicular access and improvements as necessary to local road networks with contributions and a route for a cycle path footway between the site and Hatfield Peverell railway station. There are currently modifications going forward to the inspector for this site due to the, firstly, the Hatfield Peverell railway station cycle link, and secondly, the number of new homes on the sites proposed. The application is in general accordance with this draft policy. However, the number of dwellings on the site has been reduced, mainly due to a design code-led process and due to the fact the southern area of the site has been safeguarded for national highways for works to the A12. Due to Section 2 of the local plan not yet being adopted, this application has been assessed as an out-of-town countryside development. Officers have been working with countryside properties, Essex highways and national highways for a significant length of time on this application, which has led to the design put forward to you tonight. The application has been accompanied by a detailed design code which sets the design intent for each reserved matters application that come forward for the site in the future. The site is accompanied by land use, access and movement, building heights and density parameter plans, and an illustrative master plan has also been submitted to accompany the application. The land use plan sets a framework for future development land uses within Wood End Farm. The site is predominantly residential, which is indicated as yellow on the plan, with an indicative location identified for a nursery adjacent to the Spine Street. The green areas denote amenity and natural green space around the edges of the site, parks and recreation within the centre and south of the site, and allotments to the north. The access and movement parameter plan shows a single access from a new roundabout at the southeastern end of the site from Hatfield Road. A spine street extends north through the site. The extent and location have been fixed, terminating at a bus turnaround feature. Secondary and tertiary streets will branch off the spine street, giving access to the wider site and providing a hierarchy of movement. As well as key vehicular routes, the access and movement plan establishes key pedestrian and cycle routes with a strategic footway cycleway through the centre and along the northern boundary, and an informal footway cycleway around the perimeter of the site. In terms of building heights, they're predominantly set at 2 to 2.5 storeys, with a 3-storey building, but with 3-storey buildings to be potentially located in key locations, such as the entrance of the site and around the central park. These are denoted as the darker purple areas. No 3-storey buildings are acceptable to the north, eastern and western boundaries, so as not to be overbearing over the green corridors. Similarly, 2.5-storey dwellings are limited along the northern, eastern and western boundaries. The density parameter plan sets out a range of densities suitable across the site, with the highest density at the southern end of the site, where it addresses Hatfield Road, with the lowest densities at the northern edge of the site, to meet the open countryside. The illustrative master plan shows one way in which the site could be developed and provides a vision for the site. As shown in the parameter plans, the entrance into the site is located from Hatfield Road via a new roundabout. A long spine road runs through, with secondary roads coming off. A bus stop is located in the centre of the site, with a large public open space which incorporates all of the suds and a play area for the children. A smaller village green here is adjacent, and another public open space here adjacent to this safeguarded land, which is the National Highway safeguarded land and is hatched. A strategic footway has been incorporated into the site. The detailed design of the new roundabout to the south of the site is also for approval of part of this application. This drawing shows the design of the roundabout as well as the National Highway safeguarded land. The roundabout would create a new arm into the proposed development, with one lane in and one lane out, with a new pedestrian crossing point in the middle. A new arm to the A12 slip eastbound towards Ipswich would be created, with 2 lanes either way. A new arm would be created westbound towards London to take traffic along, replacing the existing configuration. A new arm would be created to take traffic along Hatfield Road, and this would provide 2 lanes Whittem bound with a dedicated right turn into the petrol garage here. In the opposite direction, 1 lane would be provided before splitting into 2 lanes on the approach to the roundabout. The A12 off-slip to Whittem would be reconfigured slightly further north into Wood End Farm than the existing situation, and 1 lane in both directions would be provided as per the existing situation. The existing entrance into Wood End Farm here sits outside the scope of the proposal and would remain for access into the King Centre and the existing Wood End Farm complex. A new crossing point to the petrol filling station is provided along Hatfield Road, and a new footway and cycleway would be provided along Hatfield Road, going into Whittem and then going towards Wood End Farm. This would provide safe walking and cycling routes into the centre of Whittem and to Whittem Station, and be able to link in to the National Highways safeguarded land proposals. The detailed design of this roundabout has raised no objections with National Highways and ECC Highways, and has been the subject of years of discussions. In terms of the National Highway safeguarded land, this National Highways have actually submitted a supplementary consultation that came out today with new plans, and they are currently designing a scheme to improve Junction 21 of the A12 as part of the government's road investment strategy. Part of these proposals include the provision of a new Junction 21 between Hatfield, Peverell and Whittem. The new junction is proposed to fall to the south of the existing Wood End Farm development. This is Wood End Farm in this area here, whereby approximately 1 hectare of land has been safeguarded to accommodate these works. These works include new pedestrian and cycle links, which is indicated in green, to Hatfield Peverell and to Whittem, which will join up to the southern end of the Wood End farm site. Whilst the detailed design of the Junction 21 works have not yet been approved, the further consultation will lead to an application to be submitted. The estimation is in January 2022. National Highways have confirmed that the new proposed roundabout and access arrangement into the site will not prejudice the junction works coming forward. As stated previously, the application includes a design code which officers have been working with Countryside on. The design code is considered to be of high quality and forms the basis of what future developers of parcels of land of the site must adhere to. It calls with Essex Design Guide and Essex Parking Standards. The site has 3 different character areas, these being the gateway to the south of the site, the greens to the centre of the site, and the lanes to the north of the site. The gateway provides the formal entrance into the site and also contains the highest built density within the development. It is important that it provides a skirting gateway into the site and that it sets up the overarching character for the rest of the scheme, both in terms of landscape and built form. This slide shows some of the images within the design code, including the cross-section at the bottom of the safeguarded land, shared pavements, tree-lined streets, verges and highways. This character area will include a greater variety of materials to add character to the slightly high density development. Some uniform use of materials is appropriate in the central parts of the individual street scene to ensure logical use of materials and reflect streets and building status. The greens occupies the central portion of the site and provides frontage onto the main open space and Spine Street. It is mainly of medium build density and also includes interface between Lodge Farm development to the east and the existing Wood End Farm complex to the west. A light green weatherboarding is introduced for predominant use in this character area, reflecting the large area of open space as well as beige buff bricks and some limited use of yellow and green render. This character area also occupies the central park space. The park space comprises predominantly grassland and a play area, overlooked by dwellings on all sides. This open space will be informal and open in design for flexibility for a range of uses, but framed by a line of trees to define its eastern edge in relationship with the Spine Road. The central park will include active space for kickabouts, a local play space area, informal play with stepping stones, a pond dipping platform and space for active recreation. The central open space is segregated into active, passive and flexible space as seen in the top right hand corner of the screen. The park's design has been incorporated to take all age groups into consideration by providing informal shady areas to sit and have picnics, active areas for football and a formal play area. The park also accommodates a series of infiltration basins and a swale contributing to the drainage network. These gentle depressions in the ground will be dry for the majority of the time and can be used for recreation, only becoming wet in high rainfall events. There have been lengthy discussions with ECC SUDS, the developer and officers with regards to the SUDS on the site in terms of usability, design and specifications. The drainage strategy is made up of a combination of underground crates in the middle there, a swale that runs from north to south, a forebay, which is this area, this pond area here, and 2 infiltration basins, which are located within the southern area of the park. This combination has been devised in order to maximise the efficiency and effectiveness of the SUDS options, whilst also maximising the usable open space within the park. The ground investigations identified the southern end of the park as the optimum area for infiltration, and the master plan has been shaped around providing infiltration in this area. For the majority of the time, the infiltration basins will be dry and can be used for recreation. However, at times of heavy rainfall, Basin 1 will fill with water, with Basin 2 immediately to itself providing an overflow area for extremely high rainfall events, maybe a 1 in 30 storm event, so that Basin 2 will remain dry predominantly all the time. On this. A raised weir, should Basin 1 be full, is provided, where you can see number 3 on the screen. A pre-treatment forebay is included for pollution treatment, which has a pond dipping platform. This image shows a cross-section of the basins to the southern end of the site, with gentle gradients are used and stepping stones included within Basin 1 to incorporate active play. In terms of the final character area to the north, the lanes, this part of the site forms the rural interface between the development and the open countryside to the northwest. It comprises the lowest built density and is looser in character, containing a smaller village green, grass verges and the site's allotments, as well as the northern green corridor. Pale blue and off-white render is incorporated for use in this character area, combined with greater proliferation of darker weatherboarding, which will reflect the rural character of this type of development. A smaller village green is located to the northern area here, which provides opportunity for informal play and a lap for children. Like the main park, its boundaries are generally open, with tree planting providing shade. It's overlooked on all sides by dwellings and accessed by pedestrian footpath links connecting with the wider network of open space and green corridors. The site incorporates wide green buffers around the periphery made up of existing and proposed vegetation. An 8 to 10 metre buffer will be provided on the western and eastern boundaries, containing buffer planting and informal footpath. Existing boundary hedgerows will be supplemented with native shrub planting, as well as a grass planting strip to separate the boundary planting from the streets and built form of the development. The northern boundary buffer, adjacent to the railway line, is consistent with that approved at Lodge Farm adjacent. Within this space, areas of open space are provided, which includes a meandering foot and cycle path linking to Lodge Farm, potentially at its eastern end, and varying widths of amenity green space, consisting of a combination of grassland, planting and trees. The width of this buffer will range from 10 metres towards the eastern end to 23 metres in width from existing vegetation to building edge. Although very little wildlife interest was recorded on the site, which required mitigation, biodiversity enhancement principles were designed into the scheme at the earliest stages with the aim of achieving a net gain in biodiversity across the site. Replacing areas of commercial land and intensely managed arable farmland, this scheme has incorporated green buffer strips around the site to aid and encourage wildlife movement, supplemented by green corridors through the site in the form of verges and treed boulevards. These provide broad strips of landscaping planting buffer and allow for quiet enjoyment. The northern boundary, in particular, has been broadened to assist use of this land by animals such as reptiles, which were found to move between the railway line and the small strip of grassland that existed in the area. In terms of the National Highways safeguarded land, it's important that there's an interim design which provides a positive interface between the residential parcel and the safeguarded land, and which ties in with the design intent of the scheme as a whole. The detailed design of this layout will be pursuant to requirements of the Section 106 agreement, but it is envisaged that hedgerow and grassland paddock is proposed, with the southern edge and boundary with the A12 slip road defined by a simple timber post and fence rail. In terms of tree removal, the development would require a total of 5 trees or groups of trees to be removed. These have all been identified as Category C and U tree groups. None of these are Category A or B trees. The tree groups to be felled can be seen on the screen: G2, G3, G15 and G13. Whilst all effort has been taken to protect existing trees on the site, due to their random nature, it's not possible to retain them on this occasion. Importantly, a large number of the existing trees and groups of trees on the site are being retained, particularly around its boundaries, where well-established mature tree cover exists, particularly to the north, east and western boundaries. In terms of tree planting, the scheme includes significant proposals and a commitment to net gains being made. These areas here are identified within the commercial area, and some of them are already located within the highway safeguarded land. In terms of accessibility, the site itself is located adjacent to the town boundary, which lies to the south-east of the site on the southern side of the existing road infrastructure. The average walking times to existing facilities are shown on the slide. This is an average adult walking time. To the western edge of the site, within the existing Wood End Farm complex, but outside the application red line, sits a variety of uses, including a place of worship, the King's Centre, as well as the Sunday church services. The King's Centre offers a variety of uses and clubs during the week, which includes parent and toddler group, karate and charity sessions. Two pedestrian links are being proposed from the site into the existing Wood End Farm complex, which will allow residents pedestrian access to use these facilities. In terms of the widest links to the services, the site is located approximately 3 kilometres from Whittem Station and 2.5 from Hatfield Peverell Station. Whittem Station is within an acceptable cycle distance from the site using the existing cycle network and provides on-site parking for both cars and cycles. The closest bus stops to the site are the 2 Linfield motor stops in both directions on Hatfield Road, which borders south of the development. In total, there are 3 bus routes that can be accessed from the site to take you to different destinations. The application proposes to divert an existing service into the site, providing access to Whittem Town Centre and the railway station. Discussions have been undertaken with First and Essex Highways, who have confirmed the acceptability of such a diversion, which would entail extending the existing bus route, which runs from Broomfield Hospital to Boreham via Chelmsford, from Boreham to the development via Hatfield, Peverell and Whittem. This would provide a 30-minute frequency service from the development to a variety of destinations, including the station. The service would be timetabled to meet certain train times from London Liverpool Street. The service would access the development from the proposed roundabout, as shown on the movement parameter plan. To encourage the use of the bus service, it's proposed to provide all residents with up to 12 months free bus travel when the bus service is implemented. The provision of the bus service has been secured within the Section 106 agreement. There are numerous on-road and off-road cycle routes around Whittem, including National Route 16, which is made up of 2 sections running from Stansted to Shoebury-Ness. As part of the adjacent Lodge Farm development, a detailed cycle improvement strategy was agreed with the applicant to implement connections to the town centre, railway station and other key points around Whittem. These works are yet to start, but specifications are currently being agreed with the Highways Authority. The development would provide a cycleway at the site access which would connect along Hatfield Road to the improvements being delivered within the adjacent development at Lodge Farm and Maltings Lane, and further to the west to the existing Wood End Farm entrance. This would also tie into National Highways works to the A12 by continuing this route along the A12 to Hatfield Peverell. A new crossing has also been proposed on Hatfield Road to link the development with the adjacent petrol garage to the south. And these improvements have all been secured by way of condition and Section 106 heads of terms. Works have also been secured through the Section 106 to improve connectivity between the site and the centre of Whittem, including improvements to the Riverwalk. These include the installation of a 4-metre wide toucan crossing to replace the existing zebra crossing along Spinks Lane outside Maltings Academy, the removal of the grass verge outside Maltings Academy to provide full width shared surface along with the widening of the corner of Spinks Lane and Hatfields Road. Improvement works with the provision of a 2-metre wide pedestrian refuse island along with the footway widening works. A Section 106 contribution has also been sought from the developer to deliver improvements to the Riverwalk and existing footway. In terms of energy efficiency, this currently comes through building control regulations. However, a condition has been recommended in relation to electric vehicle charging points to each residential property, and Countryside have committed to that within the design code. Having said that, and going further, the question has been posed to Countryside given the climate agenda, and they have provided a list of commitments as a company. Furthermore, Countryside have confirmed they are striving towards this site being electric only, with no gas or fossil fuels to be provided to individual homes. The committee report details that members would be updated on outstanding issues in relation to the Section 106 contributions. These have now been agreed with the developer and consultees, and the updates are shown on the slide. The financial figure, should the bus provision not be not be procured. Essex Highways have updated their response to ask for a financial figure of 1.25 million to be able to provide for sustainable transport. In terms of the Section 106 healthcare provision, the committee report stated that the trigger point had not yet been agreed. This has now been agreed for a payment to be made prior to commencement of development. In terms of the Section 106 River Walkway improvements contribution, a figure of £25,000 has been agreed to be paid towards Whittem Town Council Cycleway and Footway renewal programme. And in terms of the Nhs ambulance contribution that was sought, on consideration, officers consider that this contribution request does not accord with seal requirements, and therefore no contribution has been sought to this effect. All of the contributions and updates have been included within the updated Section 106 heads of terms. I'm sorry that's so small and you probably can't read it. Basically, it's included the 1.25 million and the additional trigger points. Apologies for that. In terms of the planning balance, planning law requires that applications for planning permission be determined in accordance with the development plan unless material considerations indicate otherwise. In this case, the application site is located outside of a designated town development boundary and is therefore located within the countryside, where new development is strictly controlled to uses appropriate within the countryside. There is therefore a presumption that the application should be refused unless there are material reasons to grant planning permission. In terms of the planning balance, these can be weighed in terms of adverse impacts and public benefits. In terms of the adverse impacts, these are listed on the screen. I'll go through each in turn. The proposed development would conflict with policy RLP2 of the adopted local plan and policy CS5 of the core strategy because it proposes development outside of defined development boundaries and within the countryside. This conflict is afforded limited weight as the proposal would accord with the Section 2 plan and seeks to bring forward a strategic site identified for residential use, a factor which must be given significant weight. The proposal is also in general accordance with the Section 2 plan in that the number of dwellings have been reduced on site. In terms of the character and appearance of the area and landscape character, a degree of harm would inevitably be caused to the character of the landscape as a result of the change in use of the site. However, these effects would be highly localised and would not result in an unacceptable impact upon the character and appearance of the area. Thus are attributed limited weight in the planning balance. In terms of loss of employment, a degree of economic harm would be inevitable in relation to the loss of employment on the site from the relocated businesses and is weighed against the development. However, in a wider context, the site is allocated as a strategic site through a plan-led process, and the construction phase of the development is predicted to last for approximately 10 years, generating a wide range of construction jobs over a prolonged period of time. This harm is therefore judged as being limited and given limited weight in the planning balance. In terms of tree loss, a degree of harm would arise from the loss of trees in those areas where alternative layout solutions do not exist, albeit, as stated, all of the tree groups to be removed are unclassified or Category C groups. However, it is considered that much of this harm will be mitigated through the provision of a biodiversity net gain across the site and obligations to provide new trees and for all new streets to be tree-lined. Benefits such as enhanced habitat management, provision of public space and enhanced sustainable transport links cannot be derived without some tree loss occurring. Taking the above into account, officers attribute this harm limited weight. In terms of impact on the highways, the existing highway network in this location is at capacity and therefore it is inevitable that additional development on the site will give rise to some car movements which will place additional strain upon the existing highway infrastructure in the locality. However, these effects will not be as great as they would otherwise be on account of the measures being taken to encourage inhabitants to take up alternative sustainable modes of transport. It has been judged that the residual cumulative impacts on the road network would not be severe and thus would not be sufficiently substantial as to outweigh the benefits of this proposal in isolation. In the opinion of officers, this harm has been attributed limited weight. Whilst a degree of harm would arise from loss of B&V agricultural land, given the contextual prevalence of such land through the district, this harm is judged to remain very limited and accordingly very limited weight is given to this loss in the planning balance. In terms of benefits, the proposal would bring forward a strategic site with the emerging Section 2 plan. The development proposes 400 dwellings, of which 30% would be affordable housing. The provision of this housing would deliver associated economic and social benefits. Some of these would only exist during the construction phases, whereas others would be sustained, such as the increased patronage of existing services and facilities in the town. Officers consider these benefits and in combination attract significant weight in the planning balance. The non-residential elements, consisting of a children's daycare nursery, which would generate a number of jobs on site with associated economic benefits in addition to the social benefits of facilitating the creation of a local community with its own facilities, also accessible to existing local residents. Again, these factors weigh in favour of the planning balance, with more than moderate weight being attached to them. In terms of open space, the proposed development will provide a variety of public open space on sites, including the provision of allotments. In total, the open space provision is over the policy requirement for a development of this size and will offer benefits to the wider community, which go beyond those necessary to meet the needs of local residents. These benefits have been attributed significant weight in the planning balance. The development proposes improvements to the existing transport network to mitigate the impacts of development and whose effects would extend beyond the immediate inhabitants of the development into the wider community. These benefits include a public transport obligation to redirect the local bus service into the site, delivery of improvements to highways to facilitate and improve pedestrian and cycle routes between the site, school and railway station, and financial contributions to improve the river walkway. These benefits are regarded to be significant, with an associated degree of weight being attached in the planning balance. When considering the flat planning balance, and having regard to the adverse impacts and benefits outlined above, and having regard to the requirements of the NPPF as a whole, officers have concluded that the benefits of the proposal outweigh the adverse impacts. Consequently, it is recommended that planning permission is granted for the proposed development. It is therefore recommended that members resolve to grant planning permission subject to the Section 106 heads of terms and recommended conditions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alison. Thank you for a very detailed presentation. Before I open up to members, can I just check with Councillor Mrs. Beavers? Do you have any interest to declare, Councillor Mrs. Beavers, before I move on?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Indeed, I do. I'd like to declare a non-pecuniary interest, please, in planning application 21007264, as I'm a member of Gosfield Parish Council. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Councillor Mann.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairman. Thank you for the report. The report very, very detailed, and your report just now, again, very clear and a very good level of detail for an outline permission. I mean, this is a very important site. Been a long time coming, but it is allocated. Not only allocated, but is a strategic growth location in section 2 of our emerging local plan. I think that this is something that I personally can support, and there may be some sort of tweaking available when we come to reserved matters, but it's very clear that sort of a very great deal of work, 2 years' work, has gone into this, which is only right for development that will take 10 years to build out. Only one sort of question for officers. It's quite a general one. There is properly and usually in connection with large applications like this concern about healthcare provision, and we've heard it again from the town council this evening. Now, quite often, I think I can recall in the past that health authorities have volunteered detail about how they intend to spend their 106 contribution. Have we, as an LPA, any residual power to actually sort of demand from the health authorities how they intend to allocate such monies that is due to them. I suspect the answer might be no, but it certainly would be helpful if we might on occasions be furnished with fuller details than we get. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Alison, did you want to come back, or Chris? I'm not sure, Chris. Okay.
Thank you, Councillor Mann, for the question. I think obviously officers have been in discussion with the NHS. We've got the contribution request, and actually a key part of the discussion with the developer has been seeking to agree the trigger for the payment of the contribution, which form part of the updates for members this evening, to ensure that that money is received, so that the NHS would be able to bring forward a proposal. Obviously, we're as keen as Whittem Town Council to see a facility coming forward for Whittem, and yeah, certainly that's come up as part of discussions with officers. But in terms of the detail, it's very much that's the onus is on the NHS in terms of bringing forward those proposals, as opposed to something that we can effectively force the statutory consultee to come forward. And it's the same response as well in terms of the amount on the contribution as well. We're led by the NHS on that in terms of the amount that's been requested, and effectively we have secured as officers the contribution that's been requested, along with an early trigger to ensure the delivery of the facility. So we're seeking to try to do everything we can as officers to facilitate that additional healthcare provision within the town. I'm not sure if that fully answers the question, yeah. Councillor Mann, but
in the report, Chris, it actually says on page 18 that payment should be made before the development commences. Is that not right?
So that was the request that's been made from the NHS, and that's what has been agreed, that it's a pre-commencement trigger as part of the 106. That's been one of the items that we said we'd update members on following the publication of the report. That was an item that was still under discussion with the applicant.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Mrs. Spray.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I am actually in agreement with pretty much everything that Councillor Mann has said. This is, yes, an allocated site in our Section 2 plan, and it's clear that there has been considerable consultation between the developer and officers and the statutory consultees, and as a result of that, I think what we have here is a very acceptable site, very acceptable proposal. And although it is outline, I think we get a pretty good idea of the proposed layout of the site, and actually quite a bit more detail than we might usually get on an outline plan. Even with a site of this size, we don't necessarily get to see quite as much as this. So I think that is all to the good. There are quite a lot of things to like about it, in no particular order of importance. Substantial green buffers around the periphery of the site and planting. I know that some trees have to be removed. This is not unusual on sites. We, as a local planning authority, try and limit it as much as possible, but it is not unusual for some trees to have to come down in order to make way for either access or the building of homes. And what we do ask is that there is considerable replacement planting, and there's good evidence that that is what we will get here. A much improved bus service, cycleway from the site into the town, 30% affordable housing, that's very welcome. And the Section 106 contributions, 25,000 to Whittem Town Council for the Riverwalk, and the NHS money, which I won't go into again because I won't repeat what has just been said, but we know the problems with that, and we also know that it's down to the NHS, and all we can do is push for as much money as possible, and hope that they will come up with a solution. One question I did have, which is sort of related to the NHS, was a request from the East of England Ambulance Service for money, which I think is a bit unusual. I don't really recall seeing that before. Can I just ask the officer, is that happening? What was the answer on that? Or Chris, please.
Was on the screen.
So thank you for the question, Councillor Spray. So the update from officers in that respect is we do not consider it to be compliant with the SIL regulations, and therefore we don't feel that we're able to capture that contribution as part of the Section 106 agreement. As I understand, we have canvassed colleagues from other authorities across Essex. It seems as though this is one of the first requests that have been made for the amount, but however we are concerned that unlike the NHS contributions, which are effectively looking for Section 106 money to expand buildings, this isn't very much linked to service, and it's on that point where we have a concern in terms of the compliance with the SIL regulations. So that was the conclusion we came to as officers, and the recommendation is not to include that within the heads of terms as requested by the ambulance service. Okay. Hopefully that clarifies.
Yeah, thank you. That's cleared that one up. I was slightly surprised. I didn't recall seeing such a request before. So for me, Madam Chairman, I think this is, I say, very acceptable. Brings forward a lot of good benefits for the district and for that area. So I'm happy to move officer's recommendation for approval. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Mrs. Spray, does it find a seconder before I move on? It does, Councillor. Mrs. Parker. I have got other people who wish to speak. There are quite a few issues raised by the town council in public question time, and I don't think they've all been answered. But once I've gone round to all the members, I would like some of these questions answered. Now got Councillor Abbott. And then I come to you, Councillor Mrs. Parker.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I accept that this site is draft allocated in Section 2, but I don't think it's all it's cracked up to be. And I think we've rather skated over some of the more significant problems with it. One of them is the lack of connectivity through to the existing Red Rose site that's being built out. And there's a letter on file which members may have seen from Stratton Parker about the connectivity, where they suggest that the road access could be taken through the Lodge Farm estate rather than create this new roundabout, and that might be a more optimal solution. I actually agree with that. I think creating a new access at this point is dangerous. Now, I know we haven't got an objection from the highways authorities, but someone very local to this area knows it. The traffic comes in very fast into Whittem off the A12 slips, and they're going to be confronted with this new junction. The other point about the junction is, and I'm really sad to see this yet again, is no one has said about the huge mature tree in the middle of the verge that's currently there. It's an elm. It's survived Dutch elm disease. It's survived having cars passing by and lorries on both sides of it. And no one from highways has said anything about the fact this tree will be destroyed by this new junction, which I'll come back to in a minute. This site is actually very remote from Whittem Town Centre. In fact, it's significantly closer to Hatfield Peverell railway station than it is to Whittem. And as sometimes happens in these reports, the actual analysis doesn't hold out with the conclusions. So it's said that, for example, the County Council does not require a contribution for secondary school transport because it's walkable. But the distance to the Maltings Lane Academy is 1.9 kilometres, compared to the standard definition of walkable as 800 metres. 2 kilometres is considered to be the absolute outside edge. So I would suggest that a lot of children from this estate will be driven to the nearest schools. They might cycle in good weather, they might get the bus, but a significant number of them will be driven. And, you know, I just feel that's been skated over. Another issue, and we discussed this previously, I remember, for the, Fearing application. Part of the open space is going to be used for water attenuation. It's not acceptable, because it means that if we get wet weather and with climate change we're going to get more of these intense wet spells, part of the open space will not be usable. And I, for one, as a parent, I'm sure there's lots of parents in this room, a little bit hesitant about having open spaces which might flood, and your young children go running off down to the open space and there's actually 2 foot of water in it. So I don't know why officers think that is acceptable. On the NHS, we're just going round and round in circles. The Town Council have raised this. I want to raise it even more strongly every meeting we discuss this. There is no plan to expand the provision in Whittem that we know about. The MP was talking years ago about having a new clinic and trying to get all the GPs into one clinic. Well, first of all, I don't believe the people of Whittem or nearby villages have been asked whether they want all their existing GPs to close and go into one clinic. And secondly, it doesn't appear to be getting off the ground because, as I understand it, and correct me if I'm wrong, some of the GPs don't want to do it. So we've got this money piling up on Section 106 pots, but actually in terms of what's happening in Whittem, very little. I mean, for example, the application we looked at a couple of weeks ago, money was supposed to be earmarked for the Collingwood Road surgery. Well, the Collingwood Road surgery is in what used to be a private house. I was going to play with the children there when it was a private house, so I know what it's like inside. How you expand that in a conservation area, I don't know. So there's significant. I've got significant problems with this, and I think we could do better. And what I'd like to suggest, the mover and the seconder may not agree with this, but I'd like to suggest actually we go for deferral to try and sort some of these issues out, because in particular this issue of the connectivity through to the Redrose site. So the officer said, if I heard her right, the Cycleway may link in to the Redrose site, but that's not a given unless this issue, I think, is a ransom strip there, can be dealt with. I don't think that's acceptable. And whether we can look at an improved access arrangement through to the Redrose site rather than have this proposal here and the loss of this mature elm tree, which no one's mentioned. And just finally, Madam Chairman, the Cycleway Connection sounds great until you actually look at the details. So the first section along Hatfield Road, fine, but then it dives off into the Electors Way estate. It goes down various alleyways. If you look at the amount of improvement en route between there and the railway station, it's very little. I don't know what percentage, but I would imagine 3/4 of it or more is not going to change compared to the current arrangement. And I don't think we said this previously, didn't we, for the lodge estate when we had the application came back last time. I don't think those of us who live and work locally think enough is going in to having a fully connected up cycle network within Whittem. So that's my concerns, Madam Chairman. I say in principle I accept the site, but I don't think this has done enough that we should grant this tonight. I think we should come back and have another look at it, not least because how important this site is, but I would like officers' views, please, on the loss of that mature elm tree.
Would someone like to respond? Is this a highway issue?
I was going to say, given the highway points that were raised, perhaps
Yes,
if I could...
can I ask you, Mr Mason, would you like to respond to that? Because it sounds to be more of a highway issue than... Please.
Good evening, Madam Chair.
Good evening.
Specifically, some response around the roundabout question. Is that what you're looking for particularly?
At the elm tree, yes.
I'm not able to comment on anything to do with trees, unfortunately. That's outside of our area of expertise. As a highway authority, our role is to consider impact in terms of capacity and safety. And tree loss is not something the highway authority take into account. That's a planning matter and for the planning authority to consider. In terms of the roundabout itself, it's been designed to the required highway design standards. And has been subject to a stage 1 safety audit, quite extensive negotiations with the applicant's highway consultant to arrive at the solution that's been presented this evening. It's also been agreed in principle by National Highways as well, because obviously it's quite close to the A12 and what will be the new A12 as well.
Right, thank you. Did you wish to respond, Chris, or not?
I can come back on the other point. So I think in terms of, I was just looking, so just in terms of the ransom strip issue, and Alison might have some comments on this as well, the issue we have is we can't compel the developer necessarily to form a link through the site. And I was just checking the draft policy within the emerging plan, because I don't think there is anything within the draft policy that actually requires the connection between the two sites. I will just double check the wording in a second, but unlike some of the other allocations that we've got within the plan that have required that linkage to be provided. I'm pretty sure that there isn't such the requirement in between Whittem Farm and the Lodge Farm site. Now, obviously, in that context, we've got to assess the site on its own merits in terms of its access arrangements, which in this particular case, you've got the Statutory Highway Authority and National Highways as the Strategic Highway Authority raising no objections to those connections. Perhaps, Alison, if I could just ask you to put the illustrative plan up, because I think this hopefully will, again, just re-emphasise the point that officers have sought to try to address this issue as far as we feel we're able to. If I could just wait for the plan, though. Yeah, if we go to the illustrative master plan again. Thank you. So, as you'll see, so you can see the connection points potentially that are being sought to be created through the illustrative layout, and obviously that's not for approval, but you can see from the master plan there the linkages into, or how they could be taken through to the Lodge Farm development. So, but that is, in officers' view, the best that we're able to achieve. We can't compel the applicant to actually form those connections where it's beyond the land ownership and control of the applicant. So that's a separate commercial point. If the site was such that it was landlocked and those connections were clear, that's where we could have potentially had something firmer within the emerging policy that would actually give us some more clout to actually require those connections to be provided. But hopefully that provides some clarity on that point. And then so I take the point about the Nhs contributions and the position in terms of Whittem. As I said, from an officer perspective, we've sought to secure the contribution that's been requested by the Nhs and secured the trigger as early as possible to ensure that those funds could come forward. In terms of the other points, sorry, I'm just looking through the statement from Whittem Town Council again. So the fire hydrant point is actually picked up within the report under the fire services response. If you bear with me, I'll just find the page number for you. So it's on, it goes over between page 18 and 19. But effectively they've looked at that. So there is a point about fire hydrants, but effectively that's picked up and would be a matter for future consideration. But I mean, I think the overriding thing, I suppose, in terms of the comments, starting off with what Whittem Town Council said, is the application has evolved quite considerably. And I note the point, Councillor Abbott, you were saying about certain concerns around the application. I think from an officer perspective, officers have worked very hard with the applicant here to actually bring forward a strategic site and secure a design code here, which is of the same quality of what we've secured on other strategic sites, and I would commend Countryside for that. You also raised a question about the SUDS feature with the open space in the centre. Alison, have you got the plan again for the SUDS feature? Perhaps we could just put back up again. And again, I might just have to pass over to Alison for a bit more of a detailed explanation in terms of the site itself, in terms of the southern and northern part of the site in terms of being suitable and the areas of open space. But effectively with what's proposed, I mean, certainly from in my professional view, the area that's being proposed here is actually a really high quality area of open space. It's well established, and certainly from an office perspective and from County SUDS as the lead local flood authority even, SUDS does have an opportunity to actually enhance areas of open space in terms of the quality and the richness of that area, as well as the biodiversity and the ecology around it. But perhaps, Alison, could I just ask you to come in just on the specifics there about the usability of the area and the quantum of open space?
Yeah, sure. So for this site, the original proposal were that there were going to be different SUDS basins located around the site. However, having spoken and having undertaken more discussions with the applicant, the SUDS basins were actually reduced where you've got a underground crate, that was actually another SUDS. Now, we worked very hard with the applicant in terms of the gradients of these basins, in terms of the usability, where the SUDS could be located, and how they could be incorporated into the development, as opposed to either a large basin at the front of the site or scattered around the site, or large ditches, for example, similar to Lodge Farm, towards the edge of the site, and working very hard with the Lead Local Flood Authority and the developer. This was the best solution given the soils for this particular site. Basin 1 here, that will be used as essentially the basin that will be filled when it is raining. Basin 2 here will be an overflow, so it will be usable all of the time. So essentially it's just for the whole of the site. This basin, just one basin is taking the water for the whole of the site, rather than lots of different infiltration basins dotted around the site. So we considered this, and the LFA considered this as a really good option, and allowing the space to be used. And in the summer, when there isn't as much rainfall, it can be used as there's some stepping stones indicated here. Obviously, that's all to come forward with Reserve Matters application. But you've got a very, very large area of usable open space here, apart from this basin here, that will act as your main water catcher, and it's an infiltration system, so there will be no water let out into the local water course.
Thank you very much for that explanation. For Whittem Town Council, I just want the fire hydrant question that you asked is the answers on page 19. And with regards to heat pumps and solar panels, we don't have a policy whereby we can ask for those at the present time, which does rather upset us at times, but I just want to make that clear for you. I now go on to Council Mrs Parker.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, and thank you for that very detailed presentation. I think that one of the things that strikes me about this application is this very, very detailed design code that has been produced as a result of consultation between us and the applicant. I did have a look at it myself, and was impressed by the detail actually that's gone into, and how much thought has gone into the design that will govern this whole development, whoever ends up developing it. So I was impressed by that, and as Chris has pointed out, it's a fantastic park right at the centre of the development, which will be really appreciated. I think that lovely tree-lined avenue, the allotments, the quite a substantial planting around the edge. I think it really will be quite a quality development. So that's very much in its favour, and obviously, as has been pointed out, it is an allocated site, albeit quite a distance from the centre of Whittem. I do have a few questions. I mean, I was going to ask questions raised by Councillor Abbott, but I think it's probably concerning all of us. It's just, I find it's just incredibly frustrating that we have two developers, very well known, who are for some reason unable to agree a means of getting between the two sites by on foot or on bike. I find it quite disappointing that that connection hasn't been achieved so far. I would just like to ask whether they thought that this could come up in Reserve Matters, whether that connection could form part of a Reserve Matters application. I'd quite like to ask that question. The second question I have is just wanted to clarify in relation to the park, whether there will be facilities there for older children. I think quite often we think about young children, but I think also older children sometimes need, some recreational activities. I appreciate there's quite a lot of sort of open space, kick a ball around and so on in the park. But I just wondering whether there was any thought about providing any sort of equipment like basketball hoops or anything like that. The third question I had was just, I wasn't sure what the trigger was on the community centre, 106 for the community centre. And then I just wanted to ask a couple of questions about highways and the proposed roundabout. So, I mean, one thing that has sort of occurred to me as a non-expert highways person is whether or not there'll be so much traffic coming off the A12, whether it'll make it very difficult for people to exit their roundabout coming off that estate. And the second question really is, I'll see the consultation for the widening of the A12, the section that's been published today. Will that proposals that are being put forward, will they fit in with this proposed design of the roundabout? Will that roundabout have to be sort of dug up and redone if the whole A12 thing finally gets going? That's all my questions. Thank you.
Right, I'll ask Alison to answer your first ones first, then I'll go to Mr. Mason for your final two questions. Alison, please.
Fine. In terms of your first question with regards to the ransom strip, this is a conversation we are having with Redrow. A couple of weeks ago, I presented phase 3B and 4 to you, and I think the same question was raised then. Essentially, that strip is neither in the red line of Wood End Farm or within the red line of Lodge Farm, so it sits outside the scope of both applications. From discussions with Redrow that we've already started with regards to that strip, they have contacted Land Registry to find out who actually owns that. And it's hard to be able to discuss this with Countryside yet because the application that I present to you tonight has not yet got planning permission. So to be able to go down that route of trying to get connections into a site that hasn't yet got planning permission, it's very hard to start those conversations. So if this application was granted, then there are definitely discussions that we would want to start. I don't think that in terms of that strip, it is quite a wide strip of existing vegetation and there are some very nice trees there as well. So it would have to be very sensitive in whatever was proposed there in terms of whether it would be vehicular or just pedestrian and cycle routes through. Wood End Farm application have indicated just pedestrian and cycle as opposed to vehicular as well, because that obviously introduces new matters that need to be taken into consideration. But it's definitely an aspiration with both Redrow and Countryside to be able to get those links through. But without having two sites with planning permission, to be able to start to facilitate those connections is quite tricky. But it's, yes, I've worked with both Redrow and Countryside to be able to link those two, their Redrow's roads and Wood End Farm's potential roads to go through so that there is that potential future connection. And that's why I always refer to it as a potential connection, because we don't really know who owns the land or whether or not that there is potential for compulsory purchase, but that's not kind of within the scope of this application at the moment. So does that answer your first question? Sorry. And I think the second one was with regards to play equipment for older children. That will come forward as part of the Reserve Matters application in terms of the detailed design. This is obviously, we know, outline, and there is a detailed design code, but to go into that level of detail that we might want to change in the future, we've just identified it as a leap at the moment, but identified the formal and informal recreation areas, but that could certainly be incorporated at the Reserve Matter stage. I have got to the end of the questions that I wrote down. I think it was highways next. Sorry.
But the other one was on the community centre. When does that come into play?
Neil, would you be able to answer that one?
Yeah, so we've instructed solicitors to start drafting Section 106, but we haven't got all the triggers agreed yet. So the NHS one we certainly have got agreed. I think we're conscious that we want the community centre building to come forward early. We don't want it to be held up. So I think we would include a provision within the drafting that the financial contribution could be used to repay the council capital that's been expended on the project. But I think we would still be looking to try and have the contribution paid relatively early in the project. In the development, so that council's not left out of pocket for a significant period of time. But we don't want to have to delay the Maltings Lane building further whilst we wait for the contribution to come from this development. So that's the solution that we're looking at. So I hope that helps.
Thank you. I'll go to Mr Mason now to respond on the highway issues, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. In terms of the roundabout, I mentioned it's been subjected to a stage 1 safety audit, but it's also been subjected to a capacity analysis, and it is showing plenty of capacity. It's actually quite a large roundabout. In terms of traffic coming off of the A12, it's actually traffic coming into Whittem from the Chelmsford direction and coming in quite quick at the moment, and don't generally slow down until they start to get quite a long way into Hatfield Road. So actually, the roundabout, we see it as almost like a new entrance to Whittem, and we're hoping it should have some calming influence in terms of it's a junction in the way, so you have to slow down. And we've been working closely with the applicants and National Highways in terms of the new roundabout, because obviously the last thing we want to do is for that to scupper the new A12. So a lot of work has gone into making sure the design wouldn't prejudice the bringing forward of the new A12.
Right. Is that answered everything? Thank you. Councillor Abbott.
I'm not prepared to let this tree go, Madam Chairman. It's been there since I was a boy. It's probably 100, 150 years old. It survived Dutch elm disease. It survived probably being bashed by vehicles over the years. And to be honest, I'm shocked at the Essex County Council Highways position that they don't care about trees. The County Council is supposed to be leading the climate change fight with its, and I declare an interest as a Climate Commissioner with its new report, which was out this year, and yet doesn't take into account the impact of its highway schemes on trees and biodiversity. It's absolutely shocking. Listening to the mood music, I think members are likely to go with recommendations. So what I'm going to suggest, and I think is we could do it within the conditions, is that the elm tree is relocated. Given that that whole area is going to be dug up, it is possible to move larger trees, and I'd like to ask the mover and seconder if that can be included, that the elm tree is relocated.
Councillor Mrs Spray, you're the mover. I'll come to you first.
Well, I think, I'm not against that if it can be done. I don't know if officers can have a look at a solution to that. I'd just add, just to be absolutely fair to the county council officer who's here, he didn't say he didn't care about trees, just that, it's not within the remit. They're looking at the roundabout purely from the aspect of safety and highways and so on.
Ignored the tree. Yeah.
So, yeah, but, I just think, just to be fair, he didn't say don't care about it. I don't know if officers feel that the elm tree can be looked at to see if it can be relocated or if something can be done. I'd be very happy for that to be included, but I don't know. I'm not a tree expert, so I don't.
Right, I'll ask Chris. Throw it to him.
I'm afraid I'm not a tree expert either, but so bearing in mind, Councillor Abbott, your strong feeling on this, I think my concern would be the feasibility of it, and I don't think between planning officers here this evening we're going to be able to give you advice on the actual feasibility of it, and my slight concern would be imposing a condition to require something that could be done, that would need to be done, which would potentially prejudice development of the site coming forward, or maybe a matter that would come back. So if members were minded, I think my suggestion would be, at most, would be to require some kind of feasibility to be reviewed to see whether or not there was the possibility to do it, and if not, compensatory tree planting to compensate that. That would probably be my best suggestion. I would just be concerned about requiring the relocation of it when potentially it may not be feasible or practical, and actually the tree specimen may not survive that as well.
Yeah, I mean, if we could at least put that in, that it's a condition, not an informative, that it's a feasibility to move it. I mean, mature elms that survive Dutch elm disease are rare. They saw on Country File the other day, almost all the mature elms in the country died due to Dutch elm disease. Just to dismiss this tree like that without even trying to save it, I think would be shameful. And we as an authority has got our own very strong policies to protect trees. So I think at the very least we should look at, from my perspective as someone who works with trees, I agree it's going to be challenging. I would agree with that. But I think we should at least try to see if it's possible.
Yes, do come back.
Sorry, Madam Chairman, I was just going to say, so I think that officer advice would be, if members were minded, that would be the sort of condition we would have to look at. The only thing I'd just re-emphasise is in terms of looking at the site overall, the tree loss on this, and I appreciate this is a particular thing, a particular feature that would be lost. However, taking in the round, actually, you are talking about a very low number and an awful lot of mitigation coming forward in terms of additional tree planting that would come forward with the development. And yeah, it would be a sad loss, but I think from an office perspective, where these things are required to be removed for highway reasons, that loss is justified in the overall when you're considering all of the factors together. But I appreciate the strong feeling. And sorry, Madam Chairman, just for completeness and for the avoidance of doubt, just in terms of the ransom strip, I mentioned the emerging draft policy, so LPP 23. Just for the avoidance of doubt, that policy, in terms of the ransom strip issue, it refers to appropriate vehicular access and improvements as necessary to the local road network. So there's nothing within the policy that actually requires that connectivity point between the two sites. So unlike some of the other applications, where it's been much firmer. So again, I think Anderson's made the position clear that we would like to see a connection through, and would continue to push that. But in terms of compelling something through conditional 106 on this application, I think we feel that would be difficult to do. Hopefully those comments are helpful.
Could we not have still request a feasibility study as to whether the tree could be moved or not? Would that doesn't commit us to moving it. We could find out if it's a possibility. I mean, there's nothing wrong in finding out if it's a possibility.
Yeah.
Councillor
Yes,
Mrs.
I think
Gray
that
as the mover.
sounds like a sensible way forward.
We
A
request,
feasibility, if it is.
it's not a condition.
Possible,
This is a.
Yes, because what I wouldn't want is if the answer is absolutely no, we have looked at it and no, nothing can be done. I wouldn't want everything then to grind to a halt because of that. Okay.
And are you happy with that as seconder? Yes. Right. Well, sorry, Councillor Ritchie.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Slight change of topic. I really welcome the strategy around the bus transport in and out of the proposed development, even more so that they are going to offer up to 12 months free for residents of the development. Just a quick question though. Post that 12 months, would that bus service and the frequency be revenue reliant, Chris? I'm only asking because of the sorry state of Great Notley village that had a frequent bus service both north and south, and only has a 2-hourly service north. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Madam Chair, thanks for the question, Councillor. The bus service is actually something that's been negotiated between the applicant and the bus company. So the financial implications that what it's going to cost the developer is something that's been negotiated between themselves and the bus company. So I'm not party to those negotiations. That's like a private commercial contract that's been arrived at. So that's something that's been discussed between the two parties, and the detail of that's not been shared with us, there's nothing wrong with that.
Chris, thank you.
So just to add to that point, which I think the issue was once the subsidy effectively runs out, what happens with the bus service? So I think with all of these, when we secure these types of contributions, the aim is effectively to try to establish a sustainable route that then becomes effectively a self-sustaining route in terms of the fares and the revenues that are generated to keep the route in existence. So effectively the pump priming is to try to establish the route, and then it is hoped then that it becomes part of the daily event and life of those residents that are living within the development, that then you continue to use the bus service afterwards to get to the station or wherever they're travelling to use their sustainable modes of travel. But it is for a time-limited period effectively, and that's all effectively we could secure through the Section 106 would be that time-limited to give it the best possible chance, hopefully, for it being a self-sustaining route in the future. I don't know if that answers the question, but hopefully
it does, so that it could reduce over time if it's not used or utilised by those that live on the development. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Well, members, we've given this one quite a good airing, and it has been moved and seconded that we approve this application with a request for a feasibility study on of moving the ability to move the elm tree. All those in favour? Thank you. Those against? None against. That application has been granted. Thank you, members. We now come on to application 5B, application number 20-00128 Outland, North of Colchester Road, Whittem. This can be found on pages 93 to 127 of your agenda, and I do have one person wishing to speak on this application, and that is Mr. Adam Collins. He is the applicant. Mr. Collins, would you like to come and make your statement, please? Good evening.
Good evening. My name is Adam Collins. I'm the Managing Director of PFE Express Limited, the applicant for this planning application. PFE is a £100 million turnover family-owned business originally set up by my father in 1983. We currently have 137 direct employees. Our business is the transport and distribution of goods from Felixstowe and London Gateway ports for onward transportation to our clients, which include major retailers such as Aldi. Our current business operates from Foremost House in Whittem, which we developed in 2001. We plan to expand our business by building a new distribution headquarters building, which will enable our business to expand and grow in the future. Our proposal is to submit a reserve matters application following the approval of this outline application for a building of approximately 120,000 square feet, which will include 20,000 square feet of offices. The proposed expansion will potentially double our existing workforce from the 137 to over 250. These employees will be predominantly locally sourced. We submitted this application, the planning application, in January 2020. It's been somewhat frustrating for the planning of the expansion of our business. It's taken so long for the application to come to committee. In terms of sustainability, we already have cycle storage, staff showers to promote sustainable transport to our staff, and we offer access to charging points for all employees with electric cars. We will aim to incorporate the very latest sustainable materials in the construction of our new headquarters and to further promote alternative environmentally friendly energy sources, namely PV panels, etc. I urge the members of the committee to approve this planning application in order that I can expand our business, remain in Whittem, which we're very happy to do so, and create more permanent jobs for the local area.
Thank you, Mr. Collins. Thank you very much for coming to make your statement. I have no one else wishing to make a statement on this application, so I'll go straight to the presentation, which is going to be made by Chris.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I'll just let the slide load. Thank you. So, yes, this is an outline planning application for a flexible use between B2, B8, EG3, which is light industrial, for future development of buildings up to a maximum height to ridge of 43 metres BOD, comprising maximum gross internal floor space of 15,470 square metres, and then with associated service yards, parking and so forth. So the site is located to the north of Colchester Road in Whittem. I will just take you through the plan. So as you can see, the site is located as indicated by the location plan and the site edged red. So the site is located adjacent to the Eastways industrial estate on the edge of Whittem. You can see from the location plan that the site is characterised. You've got the mainline railway line to the north, the A12 to the south. The site is just over 4.3 hectares in size. I will move on. Oh, there we go. Just to the existing site plan, which shows the topography of the site. But so you have the existing industrial estate, which is located on the left-hand side of that plan. One of the existing features, which I'll come back to, is the existing tree belt, which screens that side of the industrial area to the open areas to the north, east and south. And then a little bit more of a wider context in terms of the site plan. So again, you can see the arrangement of the site. Now, members may recall the land on the right-hand side of the red line plan. This was subject to an application, a separate application, which came before members at the end of September, where there was a resolution to grant permission for a similar form and scale of development as proposed within the application site area. The site is also located within flood zone 1, which is a low probability of flooding. And critically, the site, along with the land adjacent on the right-hand side, forms part of an emerging draft allocation within the Section 2 plan from an employment policy area. So in terms of the proposed development, the application is in outline form with all matters reserved apart from access and scale. As mentioned, the use classes proposed are B2, B8 and EG3, which is the new use classes for light industrial. There's a maximum ridge height proposed across the site of 43 metres AOD and a maximum floor space of 15,470 square metres. That's the parameters that effectively we are looking at. The access into the site would be provided via Eastways, which is the existing estate. And from the slide in front of you, although in outline form, the applicant and agent have put together some illustrative, indicative options for how the site may come forward, effectively showing various different permutations of buildings of different sizes and scales and configurations. As members would have noted from the location plan, the site does twist round the site, and so some of the options are for standalone buildings to the northern side, but also include the potential for an extension to the existing building that was referred to by the applicant as part of his statement. So you can see, hopefully there in option 1 in particular, that shows a potential extension to that building. Same with option 2, with further development to the north side. These are not for approval, but it just shows one way, various ways in which the site could be developed and accommodate the range of floor space that's sought within the application submission. As mentioned, in terms of the access, it would be via the existing access off of the Eastway site. This plan shows in a little bit more detail the two existing buildings adjacent to the strategic allocation. And you'll see indicated here the area within which access would be provided to the adjacent land that now benefits from a resolution to grant outline plan and permission. One parameter plan for approval, and as set out within the report, this just shows the maximum heights across the site for buildings. So effectively, it steps down as you get closer towards the A12, which again aligns with the adjacent site and gives us the certainty that actually, in terms of scale and its wider impact, that the scale of built development on the site, as it would then come forward as reserved matters, would be appropriate within the local context. We also just have some illustrative site sections just to demonstrate that as well. Now, in terms of the tree constraints, so as mentioned at the start of the presentation and as shown on the plan, we do have this existing tree belt, which effectively forms the boundary at present to the existing industrial site. Now, as part of these proposals, effectively that tree belt would largely be removed, and the justification effectively for that is without the removal of that area would severely prejudice the delivery and development of the draft allocated site. So towards the southern end, for instance, the options that I've previously shown on the last few slides that showed an extension to that existing building, that would not be able to be pursued potentially as an option without the removal effectively of that tree belt area. Now, as mentioned in the report as well, and as members will be aware from the consideration of the adjacent application and the wider project, we do have the proposals for the A12 Whitening, and what this plan shows, and you can just see in terms of the blue line area, some of the land that would be impacted potentially by the A12 Whitening and the land that would need to be effectively safeguarded. But what this plan shows is how the development of the site could come forward outside the scope of that area and still provide suitable access and parking arrangements and so forth. And again, a further indicative layout with a temporary car park option for in the event that the existing building was proposed to be extended on that southern parcel. And then returning to the tree issue, what this indicative landscaping plan is seeking to try to demonstrate is that the loss of that existing tree belt effectively could be mitigated through the provision of boundary landscaping along the perimeters for the site, and obviously the adjacent area of land also perhaps performs a more important role in that respect in terms of wider views and screening, given the boundaries of the site and the openness of the site beyond it. But this application, in terms of the areas that are indicated, would be able to contribute again towards those same objectives. Just a couple of photographs. Members will be familiar with the area, but Foremost House, which was referred to just in the picture there, the existing access arrangements from Eastways, and then just a few views from within the actual application of the site itself, and across the site looking back towards, so looking effectively from the railway side over back towards the A12, and then similarly the other way. Again, you've got Foremost House on the left-hand side, so this would be looking from the southern parcel, and again just a couple of further views. So in terms of key issues, we do have the technical conflict with the development plan in the sense that the site is not allocated for development within the adopted development plan, but as mentioned, the site is allocated, does benefit from a draft allocation within the emergent section 2 plan, but there is that area of conflict with the adopted development plan. The main adverse impact that officers would identify is that tree loss in terms of the tree belt. As explained within the report, officers do acknowledge the harm arising from this. However, there is really no way, as the proposals, or in terms of the allocation for this tree belt to be retained, as it would significantly reduce the ability of the site to bring forward the scale and range of employment floor space that is envisaged from the strategic allocation. So it would severely prejudice many of those options, those indicative options that were put forward by the applicant and agent. And critically, I think from an officer perspective, although there is an adverse impact, we do feel that that would be outweighed by the economic and social benefits arising from the proposal. So the recommendation this evening is to grant planning permission subject to the conditions set out within the report, but also subject to the Section 106 heads of terms as well, which are detailed within the report. Happy to answer any questions, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Chris. Councillor Abbott.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Well, this is another site that's draft allocated in the Section 2 plan. Until recently, it used to be part of Riverwalk Parish. It's now within Whittem town boundary. It's quite a substantial, with the adjacent site to the east, it's quite a substantial extension of the industrial and employment areas along the A12. I think from the local visual perspective, the biggest issue is what are these buildings going to look like, sort of massing in the landscape. The bund which the officer talked about, we fought really hard to get that bund, and we fought really hard also to make sure the planting was established. So the fact it's going to go is obviously a matter of concern. I'm a little bit interested, as I can see why the southern section would need to go, but I don't understand why the northern section of the bund would need to go. So that's my eyesight's not very good. So it's the bit to the right of Lancaster, you've moved it. The bit to the right of Lancaster Body Repair Centre, why that bit of the bund has to go. So that would be my first question. I can understand why the southern bit would want to go. So I do take the point, though, that because the bund would then be sandwiched between two areas of development, that its landscape benefit changes. However, I think we have to look at this site not just from the view from Riverwalk End, but also the view across the river valley from the Braxted Ridge. The whole of the Whittem Industrial Estate is very visible from there. So obviously what I would be asking for is the maximum amount of retention of what's there now and the maximum amount of planting we can use to screen it. It appears that the existing hedges, which are very old by the way, that sort of snake across the site are to be retained, or largely. But my second question is, I think in the report it says details are going to be submitted later about that when we know more about the layout, but I can't see that's captured in the conditions. So clearly it ought to be. We really ought to be trying to protect those hedges as much as we can. Third point, members may remember when the site to the east of this came up, I asked about a potential cycle link off the A12, and I did send a map in to officers, but it seems to have been completely forgotten when this application's come forward. Is that viable? Because the new access road on what I'm suggesting would become part of a cycle link that would link through to Mott's Lane. And again, if we're supposed to be developing sustainable development, quite a lot of actually employees could potentially cycle, but it seems to have just been forgotten. I totally accept the point about removing vehicular access off the A12. We want to get rid of as many of them as we can because it is so dangerous, apart from the fact I wouldn't want to live along there and try and get in and out anyway. I've done it a few times. I'm visiting people. It's very dangerous. But the cycle access, I think, could be good. County, yes, it's difficult, isn't it? They say it's not going to provide a severe impact of increased traffic. But anyone who knows the area, East Way's peak time is solid with vehicles trying to get off the industrial estate. Obviously, this will increase that. But then that emphasises the point more, I think, about trying to provide alternatives. The more people we can, give them the option of cycling, it'll maybe take a few cars away from that junction. And final point is the gentleman who spoke for the application said about alternative energy, including solar PV. Is that something we can include as a condition or an informative, given that the offer's there, or is it in any way in the plans up to that level where we could require it? Thank you very much, Madam Chairman.
Thank you very much. And the applicant also said that they did encourage cyclists by providing the showers and things, and it shows that a link would be a very good idea. I come to you now, Chris, to answer those questions before I move on.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, and thank you, Councillor Abbott, for the questions. If I take each one in turn, so turning to the issue of the tree loss stroke, the hedgerow issue. So I absolutely take the point, and obviously we haven't got a detailed proposal in front of us, so the extent of the tree loss is not clear at this stage. I think that the reason for effectively flagging is the potential for the loss, obviously, when subject to the outcome from planning committee, obviously, but if we were in the future faced with the detailed reserve matters for layout, that would give the clarity in terms of where the buildings are located, the approach to the site and so forth. And obviously as part of those discussions around layout, we would obviously seek where possible to minimise any tree loss and hedgerow loss across the site, but that would be a matter that we'd need to look at when that reserve matters came forward for layout for the site. But yes, you're right in theory in terms of the northern tip, potentially there could be some retention, although if I just go back on the options, which may not appear as large on the screen as possible, but you can see on many of those that in order to get the parking, the access for a building for that northern parcel, given the dogleg effectively nature of the site, it does become quite difficult on some of those arrangements to be able. So for option 2, for instance, it would be very difficult to retain that to retain that tree belt whilst providing the necessary access through to effectively the 2 parcels which would be provided. So I think to a certain extent we would need to wait to see what layout options came forward at reserve matters, and then seek to secure the retention of as many existing tree and landscape features as possible across the site. So hopefully that addresses that point. In terms of the cycleway linkage, apologies for the omission on that. We did impose a condition on the application for the adjacent site, and it would make eminent sense that linked with reserve matters for layout, that effectively the the two things would come together. Obviously, the other site is critical in terms of how that would then potentially connect to a wider scheme along the A12 potentially, but it's obviously dependent on that. But we could certainly impose a condition should members be minded on that front. And then in terms of the renewable and sustainability elements around solar PV, again, my suggestion would be to impose an informative on that, just purely because of the policy basis in this respect, and given what may come forward. But if members felt strongly on that, obviously we can impose a condition. But in terms of the policy basis for requiring it, it may be better to impose an informative and then await a submission of reserve matters to see whether or not we're able to secure anything further or to push that point as part of the detailed discussions for the individual occupiers for that site once that's clearer.
I'll let you come back now, you've got your answers.
Yeah, well, I'm happy to move it on that basis that we require the informative on solar as the applicant has offered it. At least it gives us half a foot in the door. Definitely the condition on the cycle links, I think that is possibly viable. But I wasn't quite clear from what the officer said. Can we put, because there are lots of other conditions in here, I don't understand why we can't have a condition about details for retention of hedges and trees to be in there to be submitted at a later stage.
So sorry, Councillor Abbott. I think the broader point I'm making that given that layout is a reserved matter, and that will define where the physical buildings are located on the site. And the approach to how the site is developed, that will dictate to a certain extent where potential retention could take place and where tree loss will take place. So as part of those discussions on the actual reserve matters, rather than it wouldn't be necessary to have a separate condition on that, because the reserve matters application that includes layout would effectively address those matters and show what is proposed to be retained and what is proposed to be lost effectively. And again, those 7 options on the screen show the various permutations of that, and you will see from different options the extent of potential loss is greater on some and less on others. So that would be part of the assessment of the reserve matters applications for layout, which, given the scale of development, would come back to planning committee for consideration at that stage.
Well, I still struggle because we've got lots of other conditions which are in principle, but I'll take that view and then I'll go with what I've proposed for the 2 other changes.
Right, so you're moving it with the condition regarding the cycle link and the informative regarding the solar panels. Does that find a seconder? Oh, it does, Councillor Horner. Did you wish to speak, Councillor? No. Right. Does anyone else wish to? Councillor Mrs. Spray.
Thank you, Chairman. Just briefly, I appreciate that this has been a bit frustrating for the applicant, the delay with this, which I think was at least in part down to some operational reasons. I know they did contact the leader expressing some frustration about it, but I'm grateful to them that they've, for their patience, that they've hung on for a bit for it to get to committee this evening, and I'm pleased that it's been recommended for approval. It is, yes, an allocated site for employment, so it's going to be good for jobs in the district. And it's nice to see that, although this is an outline application, that quite a bit of thought has already gone into possible layouts. My only other point was going to be around trees and tree removal. That I was assuming that would come forward with the reserve matters application. I couldn't see anything else in here about it, but I am assuming that will form part of that. Other than that, no, I think it's very, very welcome application. Thank you.
Yes, and the applicant sitting in the room and knows how we feel about tree removal. I can see him smiling. So, well, it has been moved and seconded that we grant this application with the condition regarding the cycle link and the informative on the solar panels. All those in favour? Thank you, members. That is approved. Thank you. We now come to the application 5G. No, we don't. We come to 5C, sorry. Application 21007264, land south of the line, Scottsfield. This can be found on pages 128 to 178, and we have no one wishing to speak on this application, so go straight to the presentation, which is going to be made by Neil. Thank you, Neil.
Good evening, members. An unusual application to bring back to you tonight. So this is one, as you've seen in the agenda papers, where we had a resolution to grant from committee earlier this year, subject to completion of Section 106 agreement. One of the issues that the Section 106 agreement was to cover was the provision of public open space on site and the management arrangements thereof. During the drafting of the agreement and the negotiation, it became apparent there was a difference of opinion on one issue, and so all other issues resolved, but one issue regarding the open space and the management of it. So this is the Lime site in Gosfield. Just a couple of plans just to show you the issues. So this is the development that you would have seen when I think Melanie presented it earlier in the year. And you'll see, although perhaps not very clearly on this screen, but you can see that it's annotated here to show public open space in this northern section up here where you've got the trees, which give the site the name, but also these areas down here. So this is public open space and public open space down here. So I think anybody, including planning officers and members of the public at the time, would have looked at that plan and very reasonably had an expectation that all of those areas would be provided as public open space, would be available to all, and there would be no restrictions on their use as such. And just to follow on from that, there was an additional plan just in case there was any doubt in that application, which quite clearly shows the blue as being the public open space and the yellow, or the creamy colour on the left, being ecology land. So again, you can see quite clearly what was proposed. And I would imagine, without knowing what members were thinking precisely, but I would imagine generous provision of public open space on site would have been one of the significant benefits that members would have taken into account when they made the decision to support the application. The disagreement is really just around this southern parcel, down the bottom of the screen where you've got the Suds Basin. When officers raised this with the planning agent, Strutton Parker, we were somewhat surprised at some of the reasons that were given why it couldn't be provided as public open space. This included the fact that it had a suds basin within it and a pumping station. We did point out that there were numerous applications where Strutton Parker had been planning agent at other sites and had quite happily put forward public open space provision with suds and pumping stations within it. And we certainly didn't see why this site would be any different and why that shouldn't be publicly accessible. We were also told that there is an issue with regards to public access to it because the developer doesn't intend to provide public highway through to the site, and the private roads wouldn't allow pedestrian access or public access. I think we've certainly made the point that it's the developer's choice as to what access arrangements are put in, and there's no reason why public access shouldn't be provided to that area at the bottom of the site. I think when you look at the layout plan, I think it certainly looks like an area of public open space. It certainly has the characteristics in terms of, it's overlooked to some extent by houses, but it's a large open area. It's not shown as being fenced or having a bund or anything to separate it, as perhaps the ecology land does. I think if you went onto that development as a visitor or somebody in the village, I think you'd have every expectation that would be somewhere that you could walk your dog or walk over or do whatever it is you would do on an area of public open space. It may not be a particularly attractive area in terms of it doesn't link to anywhere else at the moment. So I don't think anybody was ever envisaging there would be hordes of people going in there, but it was an area that would be available to the public. And I think if it's not available to the public, then if residents are using it, then there could be friction. So the residents who are in those houses overlooking the public open space may well be challenging unsuspecting members of the public who happen upon it and telling them to go away. There may be pressure for signs in the future. There may be pressure for some sort of fence or railing or something, which really isn't in keeping with what was proposed. So, officers feel very strongly that this should be an area of public open space as it was suggested or as it was shown by the planning agent and the developer when the application came in. I've included this as well just to emphasise the point. So this site had an older permission for a slightly lower number of dwellings, 17 originally. but there was a Section 106 agreement which secured that land at the bottom of the site as public open space. This was another point that officers raised with the planning agent, and we were somewhat surprised to hear that there was never actually the intention to provide that as public open space, and I am paraphrasing slightly here, but it was done for commercial expediency. So really what in effect we were being told was they agreed to it being public open space, not because it was going to be provided as such, but because they thought that was the quickest way to get a planning permission and to avoid problems getting the permission, which I think is a very disappointing position to take, and one that doesn't really reflect very well on the developer, and I think wouldn't have reflected well on the council if at some point in the future we'd come under pressure to change the status of that land and it wasn't public open space. So just by way of very brief summary, like I say, it has all the characteristics and appearance of public open space. It's been designed as such. That's certainly how the officers dealt with it when it was being designed. As we've set out within the report, the NPPF does talk about social aims of planning, talks about things like inclusive community, providing opportunities for social interaction, providing activity within public open space to prevent fear of crime. So we think there's strong cues within the NPPF that would lead us to think this should be provided as public open space. Whilst the agent has clarified that the management arrangements will be no different, so it would be maintained by a management company funded by the residents. This difference in access arrangements is something that we don't consider to be appropriate. As I said, we can see situations arising either where there's friction between residents of the village or pressure to put up some form of enclosure or signs just telling people not to do things, which I think we've all seen in various developments and never look particularly inviting or good. So we really don't see why we want to have that situation arising. I think there's also an issue that actually it diminishes the benefits that the planning committee would have taken into account when they passed the resolution to grant permission. And the government is quite clear that developers should not be coming back subsequently after permission is granted and diluting the quality of what it is that they've proposed originally. So I think we haven't been given any reasonable explanation or justification as to why the area shouldn't be public open space. We don't think it's consistent with the aims of the NPPF and the PPG, and therefore we're recommending it for refusal. Just one final point we did make, we could have dealt with this under delegated powers, so the Planning Development Manager does have delegated powers under the resolution to refuse applications where a 106 can't be agreed after a resolution is granted. But we did think this was such an unusual situation. It's one that we've not come across before in the time that I've been here, certainly, and I don't think Chris has seen anything either in his time here. We did think it was worth bringing it back to committee just to explain the unusual situation and to really get support from members that the application should be refused on this basis. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Neil. Yes, when I read it, I thought this is unusual, and the more you read, we understood why you were bringing it to us. And I don't think Stratton Park have done themselves any favour with what they've said in the letter to us today. Councillor Mann.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I too have been around quite a long time, and I can't recall two extraordinary statements connected with one application. In the officer's report, officers were notified by the applicant's solicitor that this was only agreed to as a result of commercial necessity in securing a planning permission. And then in the letter from the agent, the applicant was forced to concede the matter to ensure the consent, which is a slightly posher way of putting it. It's I think, Madam Chair, a bit like the child who says we didn't really agree, but we said yes, but we didn't mean it because we had our fingers crossed. I mean, it's an extraordinary way for a long-established agent to behave. We've heard the word disappointing, and the fact that it doesn't reflect well on the parties involved. We clearly, I think, all gave permission for public open space. We understood that sort of very well. I see we're threatened with the possibility of an appeal if we choose to go along with officer's recommendation. You know, I wonder how an inspector would treat bad faith. It'd be an interesting exercise.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Ritchie.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Yeah, for the reasons that Councillor Mann has just outlined, recommending or going along with officers' recommendations, I think it sets a really a bit of a dangerous precedent if we weren't to look at this again. You can really introduce the polarisation of small communities against the backdrop of what is a really sociable and an inclusive village. Gosfield's a lovely village, and I think actually anyone who would have moved into that development under those conditions could have been put into small good positions too, if other neighbours had thought such or certain people shouldn't be in that area. It could cause quite a lot of friction. Like I said, Gosfield is a wonderful little village. It's very inclusive, and yeah, I'm more than happy to support officers' recommendations for the refusal of this application. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Councillor Mann, did you move it?
I didn't, but I will.
Yeah, thank you. And you're
second. Thank you,
Councillor Mrs. Peevers, you wish to speak?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. And I would agree with the David Mann and Councillor Ricky, and I would like to congratulate the officers for trying to sort of make some sort of common sense of all of this, because I can assure members that Gosfield Parish Council is jolly confused by the whole thing. And in fact, I thought that the Parish Council were of the view that it was just another two properties and that all the other complications weren't there, which clearly there are. I mean, the report also says, and I just wanted to make the point, that there hasn't been any comment by the Parish Council. Well, with the officer, Neil Jones, the Parish Council has been consulted upon this site for many a year, including working with the Open Spaces Action Plan and the proposal for the Section 106 agreement, and then a letter from the developer saying that they wanted to set up a working group with the Parish Council to kind of work on issues. So I think there is so much confusion on a piece of land that's highly regarded in the village, and I appreciate that previously the planning committee approved the 17 properties, but you know, there is such a mention of trees and hedging and conservation, and Councillor Ricky has mentioned, you know, the cohesiveness of the village, and I think it's absolutely right that this is refused and, you know, goes back again and comes through the Parish Council system, but at that stage is properly explained to them, because there is so much confusion on their part. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you. Well, members, this application has been moved by Councillor Mann and seconded by Councillor Ritchie that we refuse this application. All those in favour of refusing it? That is unanimous. Thank you, members. Thank you very much indeed. That now brings us to our final application this evening, and this is application number 221-00822 full, Land off Rectory Road, Stansted. I have got a speaker on this application, just one, and Mr. Michael Harmon. He is speaking for the agent, Mr. Harmon. Thank you.
Yeah,
Good evening.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, members. Yes, as I say, Michael Harmon, speak on behalf of Mr. Steve, who's the applicant. Thank you for your time. I've seen the officer's report and note her recommendation for approval. In all honesty, I can't improve upon that report. It's impeccable in its approach to the lawful basis of determination of this matter, but further sets out a full and properly reasoned and rational basis for approval. Your officer explains how the principle of development on this site has been set by an early appeal decision and the extent planning permission. This application is to amend the design so to better improve the amenity of occupiers of the proposed dwellings without unacceptable impact elsewhere. Your officer properly goes through the various material considerations, including location, design, impact on neighbouring occupiers. before then concluding that the benefits outweigh the adverse impacts. As I've said, your officer's assessment is thorough, and on behalf of my client, I venture there is no good or sufficient reason to depart from her recommendation. Clearly, any grant of planning permission should be subject to suitable conditions, and my client agrees with those put forward by your officer and as sought by the various statutory consultees. This does lead me to consider the single third-party representation, in respect of which there is no material or unacceptable loss of light. This is confirmed by your officer's planning assessment, but also an objective and independent specialist report by Right to Light specialist surveyor. I will add that BRE Guidance 209 does recommend that design should avoid large facing windows to heat habitable rooms where that aperture would be close to the southern boundary. That's a point relevant in this case. Stystead Lodge does have an interior swimming pool, but I venture that third-party concerns as to how they heat their private swimming pool are not concerns that amount to material planning considerations or are concerns of any meat that weigh against this proposal, but there's no material loss of light regardless. There is no material overlooking of the garden to Stystead Lodge. New fences to be erected and a native hedgerow planted inside, both of which are to be secured by condition. I'm not sure actually where the vegetable patch that is said would be overshadows it is. If it's at the end of the garden, the development site doesn't go that far. If it's close to the Stystead Lodge dwelling, then there's existing overgrowth that already shadows. Furthermore, my client could exercise a permitted development right to construct a fence up to 2 metres in height. Again, I'm wholly unconvinced that this is an issue that should weigh in the planning balance. Simply put, there's nothing of materiality in that third-party representation. And in light of all of that, I'd simply invite you to follow and endorse your officer's recommendation for approval and grant permission subject to the imposition of the planning conditions proposed. On behalf of my client and their agent, I sincerely thank you for your time this evening.
Thank you, Mr. Harman. Thank you very much. Well timed. Before I go to the presentation, I'd like to introduce our officer, Ellen Cooney. Ellen has done a presentation on Zoom, I think, when we were in lockdown, but this is her first face-to-face one, so I just thought I would introduce her. Good evening, Ellen, and thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The application for consideration is 21/00822 FUL and is for the proposed erection of 3 dwellings and associated development at land off Rectory Road in Stystead. So the location map shows the application site edged in red outside but abutting the Stystead village envelope and to the north of the village. There is a linear pattern of development to the western side of the road, which links the site to the centre of the village. The principle of development was established under application 18/01665, an outline application which was resisted by the council but unfortunately was allowed at appeal. And this application seeks to focus on the design details of the development. So looking more closely at the location plan, the site is bound to the north by Stystead Lodge, to the south by a public right-of-way which separates 63 Rectory Road from the site, to the east by Rectory Road itself and arable fields further than that, and to the west the golf club and specifically this area's golf course. So the proposed block plan shows that the 3 dwellings do fit comfortably within the site and there is a good level of private amenity space for each dwelling. There is a new access proposed off Rectory Road and each dwelling would have parking for at least 3 cars plus each would have a double garage. The public right-of-way would be separate from the site and would retain its access from Rectory Road through to the golf course, and the boundary treatments proposed for the site are metal estate railings to the front, post and rail to the rear, and willow fencing to the side and between the plots. And moving on to the elevations of plot 1, this plot is to the south of the site and is characterised by two gable ends with attached garaging extending forward of the front elevation of the dwelling. The ground floor plan is substantial, has substantial internal accommodation and has open plan kitchen, living, dining area and further reception rooms. It's considered that there is a good level of natural light and outlook to all habitable rooms. And this is echoed in the first floor plan, where there are 5 bedrooms with 3 en-suites and a family bathroom, and it's considered that there's a good level of light and outlook as well. Plot 2 is the middle plot in the scheme. This differs slightly in design. It's more compact with the garage located to the side. It has a flat front elevation with a hipped roof, and to the rear elevation there'll be 2 protruding hips and a small single-storey element extending from the garage. Again, there is an open plan design for the main kitchen, living, dining area with further reception rooms and good levels of light and outlook to all. And the first floor plan is similar to that of plot 1 with 5 bedrooms, 4 bathrooms and a good level of light and outlook. The proposed elevations of plot 3, which is to the north, mimics that of plot 1 in terms of design, but the garage will be partially obscuring the front elevation of the dwelling. As is with the other dwellings, a similar level of accommodation is afforded to plot 3, with good levels of light and outlook to the ground floor and the first floor to all 5 bedrooms. These show the top of the street scene elevations. It shows the design of the dwellings varying slightly but retaining the similar bulk and massing, and the materials used will be brick, render and a mix of composite boarding. These dwellings would be located between 2 substantial properties, one of which is Stystead Lodge, which is pictured here below. There have been concerns regarding overshadowing, and this 25-degree line here, in accordance with BRE regulations, shows that from the ground floor of the dwelling there will be no overshadowing by plot 3. There have also been overshadowing concerns regarding the solar panels, which are located on the southern roof slope of Stystead Lodge. This image is taken from the daylight and sunlight report submitted by the applicant. This shows the solar value on each solar panel as existing. Yellow shows high levels of solar gain and blue low levels of solar gain from both panels. And as you can see, they receive a good degree of sunlight and solar radiation currently. So this image shows the solar panels with plot 3 in situ. It shows that the solar gains are identical and that there is no material impact on the solar panels as a result of the proposed dwelling, plot 3. Onto site photos. This is a view to the north of the site showing Stystead Lodge, and just a closer image of Stystead Lodge with the solar panels. This is a view to the south showing 63 Rectory Road, and this is where the public right-of-way runs here. And this is just another view of the public right-of-way from the access off Rectory Road towards the golf course. And just another image of the public right-of-way showing the post and rail fencing barring the site. And just a view to the golf course from Rectory Road and again further away. And a view of the site looking south with Stystead Lodge behind. And lastly, a view of Rectory Road towards Stystead Village. In summary, whilst the proposal conflicts with the development plan due to being located outside of the development boundary, the principle of development is established under the 2018 application as it was allowed at appeal. It is considered that there will be a good level of internal and external amenity for all dwellings, and officers are satisfied that the proposed dwellings would have an acceptable relationship with both neighbours. The scheme would also deliver 3 new dwellings to add to housing figures, and there will be a limited economic and social benefit during construction and in supporting local facilities once occupied. Having regard to the adverse impacts and benefits, and having regard to the requirements of the NPPF as a whole, officers conclude that the benefits of the proposal outweigh the adverse impacts and recommend granting of the permission. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Ellen. Thank you. Councillor Mrs Spray.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Ellen, for very, very clear presentation. Yes, so as an authority, we refused this on several, we thought, very clear grounds, that it would represent ribbon development in the countryside, be harmful to the rural character of the area, and would be heavily reliant on car use. Went to appeal and was allowed at appeal, which is obviously disappointing for us, but the inspector disagreed and said that it would result in little harm to the character and appearance of the area, and she also dismissed the reason of, being reliant on car travel. She didn't think that was particularly good reason for refusing it, so it was allowed. The only comment she made in her decision in relation to Stystead Lodge was, and I'll just read, it was point 16 in her conclusion: I'm satisfied that the site is of sufficient size to ensure that 3 dwellings could be accommodated without undue impact on the living conditions of the occupiers of Stystead Lodge, or indeed the residential properties to the south. I mean, the only reason that we have this before us this evening is it's for 3 dwellings, so normally it would be dealt with under delegated authority, is because it's been called in by district councillor, because the occupants of Stystead Lodge feel that the development is going to unduly impact on their property. But the inspector was very clear in that she looked at that and said no. There's also on page 190 of our report, under Stystead Lodge, Ellen has very clearly set out some detail about the effect of the property, the nearest property to Stystead Lodge. And down at the bottom, I read through it, it's quite technical, but I did read through it. It does say there would not be any impact in terms of overshadowing on either of the solar panels at any time of year, as the proposed dwelling would not interrupt the sun path at any point. So I think that's very clear. I don't think we have any reason on planning grounds, given that it was allowed at appeal, for this committee to refuse it. And I think it's very clear that the reasons put forward by the occupants of Stystead Lodge actually don't stand up to scrutiny. So I am happy to move officer's recommendation for approval, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Mrs Spray. Has that find a second? Councillor Mann, you wish to speak?
I wish to speak, but not to second it.
You don't want to second it?
Chair.
Okay.
I'll come back after a second.
I'll get a second. Thank you, Councillor Ritchie. I'll come back to you now, Councillor. Sorry. Councillor Mann.
Well, I mean, the only lawful basis for this is the inspector's decision. We turned it down. Not an allocated site, speculative site, middle of the countryside. Extraordinary inspector's decision, in my humble view, that this is not. I think she described the bus service as irregular. Well, I think it's a minibus once a fortnight, so that is pretty irregular. And anyone who's walked from Braintree to Stystead, as I've done on a number of occasions, sort of will know that that's not a sort of a happy experience, and it takes an awful long while. So, 3 5-bedroom houses. How many cars is that going to be on these sort of country lanes? But I do agree with the officers. I think the objections from the neighbours and the reason for calling fall, but that doesn't make it any more palatable to me particularly. But I understand that we have no real alternative but to pass this, but it won't be with my support.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Richard, did you wish to speak? I know you seconded it, but did you wish to speak?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I completely sympathise with what Councillor Mann has said. We as a committee refused it and it was overturned on an appeal. If the phrase "our hands are tied" was ever much truer, it would be in this application. I do have some minor sympathies with the residents of the lodge. However, the inspector was clear, and I think the indicative plans show that there will be no adverse impact. So I'm happy to second officers' recommendations for approval. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Abbott.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Could I have up the 25-degree angle slide again, please?
Ireland can do that. Yes. There it is.
And is that accurate to scale?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, so a bit of astronomy coming up, I'm afraid. Bit of astronomy coming up. So there's two different things we're considering here. One is the incident light on the solar panels, and yes, I think that is the case. The sun arc would demonstrate that they're not going to be affected. However, the objector also talked about the fact that on the south side he has, I believe, windows where light comes through which act to heat the house through passive solar heating. Now, based on that drawing, they, I believe, would be affected. We're not. Is it possible to go forward to the south-facing elevation of the lodge itself? The photograph. You can't really see, can you? I think you can just see, well, this is what I read from the objection, that there are windows on the south-facing side which act for passive solar gain. I think they are going to be affected. If you can go back to the 25-degree one. So in midwinter, the sun only gets as high as 14 degrees above the horizon. So you can clearly see that's going to be clearly overshadowed. The new house is going to be clearly overshadowing those windows for direct sunlight. I'm not talking about diffuse skylight, direct sunlight. So I think there's two aspects here. One, the solar panels agreed are probably not going to be affected at all. But in terms of direct sunlight into windows that are at ground floor level, I think for part of the day in the winter there would be some obscuration.
But the majority of the windows are on the front of the house, on this piece of the house, where it's not overshadowed.
Yeah, I'm sure though the applicant said that the south-facing windows are used for some form of passive gain. We have the same in our house, so if someone built something across those windows, it would affect the solar gain. But obviously in the winter the sun's a lot less strong anyway. Yeah. But just to point out, technically, that their reasons for objecting are not entirely groundless from what I'm seeing there.
Okay, thank you. Does anyone else wish to add anything new or further? No. Well, it has been moved by Councillor Mrs. Spray and seconded by Councillor Ritchie that we grant this application. All those in favour of granting the application? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Those against? 1 against. Abstentions? 3 abstentions. So that 3 and 4 is fine. Yeah, that application has been granted. Thank you. Let's do Well, members, that brings us to the end of our planning meeting this evening. And yes, we've got a week off next week. So I'll see you all in a fortnight. Thank you very much. And thank you to officers. And thank you to the members of the public that attended. And thank you, Alison.